the air.
I guess the PS2 Shinobi sold well enough, or at least just enough to warrant a sequel of sorts. That's how today's game came to be. The game was at least as far back in development around early 2003. By spring of 2003, Sega announced 20 games to show at that year's E3. One of them being this game, known at the time as Kunoichi, the Japanese term for female ninja. Sega showed more of the game off at E3 2003. Some outlets claimed it to only be a spin-off, but as you'll see soon enough when we get to the story, it's a sequel without being called Shinobi 2. This is despite several differences in level design, different looking enemies, but it still played similarly and even ran on a modified version of the Shinobi engine. The game was further shown off at Tokyo Game Show 2003, and its name outside of Japan was changed to Nightshade. No reason was given for this change, and it never made much sense. But it is what it is. By this point, Overworks was consolidated into WoW Entertainment, but development still went smooth. Nightshade, developed by Sega WoW and published by Sega, was released exclusively on the PS2 on December 4th, 2003 for Japan, February 10th, 2004 for North America, and March 5th, 2004 for PAL territories. Nightshade is to Shinobi what Maximo Army of Zin is to Maximo Ghost of Glory. Let's find out how. Nightshade follows Hibana, a government employee ninja who's been ordered to eliminate members of the Nakatomi conglomerate. Following the events of the previous game, Okujiki broke, and the shards shattered across Tokyo. Members of Nakatomi have taken these shards, which broke the seal, and unleashed Hellspawn from the dead once again, not realizing Okujiki is still alive and powering the Hellspawn. Hibana actually has a greater stake in this, and no, it's not just because her superiors are making her do so.
Your new objective is to recover all the pieces of Akujiki.
Kind of important to be throwing in at the last minute, don't you think?
Insubordination will not be tolerated. Those are your orders.
Well-mannered as usual, I see.
She was born in a branch of the Oboro lineage, similar to Hotsuma, but she could not go for clan leadership because of being a girl. She was put up for adoption and adopted by one of the clan elders, Jimushi. However, he ended up abandoning Hibana once he became a government agent and eventually left after becoming disenchanted with them and became a Nakatomi mercenary ninja with 3 other cronies. Yet, not everything is as it seems. You'll see if you get further along. Not quite as personal as Shinobi's story, but it has some personalness here. In any case, the story is fine. Nightshade is very similar to Shinobi. You'll move from point A to point B through a linear set of levels that usually culminate with a boss battle. Along the way, you'll cut down pretty much every enemy in sight in order to open up gates, in addition to slashing through pillar gates that have magic that block the way, or in this game's case, mirrors. You pretty much have the same set of weapons and abilities seen in Shinobi. One sword to slash at enemies, magic attacks that work like they do in the previous game, shurikens to stun enemies, along with a shuriken blast to stun all enemies surrounding you, and you can also kick enemies to break their guard like in the previous game. Gone is the charge attack, or at least it sort of looks like it as Hibana, but Hibana also does have an ability to create multiple images of herself, which, when all attack a locked-on enemy, can do serious damage. This requires part of your chakra gauge, which is another new addition here in this game. That builds up as you perform more combos. Yeah, Hibana can also air kick in 2 different ways, neither of which do damage, but stun your enemy nonetheless. The first one, float kick, just yeets enemies into the air, and the aerial kick can keep her going in the air. She can also kick enemies into the ground to create a shockwave as they hit and take out more enemies around them. Tate attacks are also back and play the same part here. Kill at least 4 enemies in quick succession to power up your chakra gauge for the special attacks. Higher combos lead to more powerful attacks. There's also now a blue meter that shows you how long exactly you have to keep your combo going from the first enemy killed. When it runs out, the Tate ends. Hibana also has the same platforming abilities as Hotsuma. She can stealth dash on ground and in air, which is useful in attacking airborne enemies, and she can wall run. You'll need these abilities as the levels have changed in design, most likely due to the fact that Hibana is not using Akujiki. Because of this, there's no longer a sense of urgency to get through the levels since her sword isn't trying to drain her life essence. Though if you put her in Shinobi's level, this would knock it down a bit in terms of difficulty. Thus, the levels have taken on a bit more of a platforming approach to them. They also tend to be a bit longer, but thankfully, there are mid-level checkpoints here, unlike the previous game. I love this addition. It definitely helps since it prevents you from wasting time by starting the level over if you die at any point before the boss. Some of the platforming here does also get a bit hectic, especially when you end up jumping from truck to truck at one point. Some objects are out of normal reach and can take quite a bit of work to reach. This is especially important because in addition to shurikens and scrolls, there are other power-ups here. Capsules and chakras increase your health and chakra gauge respectively. Rations increase your maximum energy. Bonus coins give extra points when you beat a stage. Secret cards unlock viewable items in the gallery mode, and secret coins appear and function like in the previous game. But on the whole, Nightshade is a bit easier than Shinobi because of these quality of life improvements, but it's still not an easy game. It's just easy in the parts that made Shinobi difficult, while being hard for other reasons, mainly platforming. The bosses will also still be a challenge even for experienced players. Should you want a warm-up run, you can play on beginner and or easy modes. Nightshade retains the excellent control scheme seen in Shinobi, but there are some changes. The big one is that the kick action is now its own dedicated button. This helps more because you no longer have to push down plus sword slash to do the kick, and I don't mean down or whatever, I mean down because and the specific direction that the character was facing. And the camera no longer restricts which direction the stick needs to be in for this to work. L1 is now shurikens, and R3 resets the camera. Otherwise, everything else is pretty much the same. The new additions work well and fit in fine with the other additions, but if you're already experienced enough in Shinobi, you might not be using them all that much in the end, except for maybe a few sections. Even then, experienced players should be able to find a way. The camera controls are also fine for the most part. They are pretty much act the same as they did before. One thing about the camera, though, that they didn't fix from the previous game, and something I forgot to mention in the Shinobi review, is that after completing a tate, the camera always doesn't position itself proper, meaning you might not even see the enemies you sliced get diced. And in this game's case, some of the enemies actually block Hibana herself. Besides, who wants to block the good looks of her? Oh, speaking of looks, the game's graphics are an improvement over its predecessor. The models on the enemies and Hibana herself look a bit sharper and smoother compared to the previous game. The designs of the characters are also good to look at. Normal enemies, bosses, other supporting characters, and Hibana herself. However, she doesn't have a long flowing scarf like Hotsuma, but she has a shorter scarf and a glow when stealth dashing. The environments also take on a more urban-like design. More rooftops, some subways, docks, etc. This does help distinguish Nightshade from Shinobi, although closer to the end, some things tend to feel a bit more familiar to the high-rise palace seen in the last two stages of Shinobi, at least in terms of a greater force rising from the underground. Other textures, such as vehicles and buildings and things like that, all look pleasing as well. All in all, while Nightshade doesn't push the PS2 like some other action games of this nature, it's still a nice-looking game. Nightshade's sound is also on par with its predecessor. We do get some reused sound effects, like sword sounds, stealth dashing, shuriken sounds, and other things like that. Basically, it's familiar to those who played the first, and if you didn't for some reason, get ready to enjoy it for the first time. The soundtrack also continues the techno-oriented flavor heard in the previous game, and while I don't think it's as good as Shinobi's soundtrack, it's still pretty good in its own right. I feel the bar was set so high by the previous game's soundtrack, and that it would be hard to top, but there are still some damn good songs here to listen to. It helps that the previous composers, with the exception of Tatsuyuki Maeda, return and are joined by Tomonori Sawada and Keiichi Sugiyama. In terms of voice acting, the English voice acting here is a bit more rounded and less janky overall. Now, many of the game's previous games' voice actors came back here. Only Casey Robertson to voice the new main antagonist, Kuro Hagane, and Kevin Miller, who voices the second ninja, Onibi, to confront Hibana. Sadly, anybody wanting Japanese voice acting will need an undubbed ROM, since the Japanese voice acting is limited to all NTSC-J copies of the game. Still, the English voice acting works. There's a decent amount of replayability here. You have several characters to unlock, Joe Musashi once again, and if you beat normal mode while having a same region Shinobi save on your memory card, with Shinobi being beaten at least once, you can unlock Hotsuma, and he plays just like he did in the previous game. You also have other costumes to unlock. Mission mode, survival mode, time attack mode stages, and all the other gallery items I mentioned earlier, in addition to a hard mode. Nightshade will keep you busy for a while like Shinobi did. Nightshade is to Shinobi what Maximo 2 is to Maximo 1. A slightly easier sequel that removes some of the more egregious difficulty choices, but still keeps the core of what makes the previous game not only challenging, but good. It looks good, sounds good, controls well, is pleasant to look at, has plenty of replayability, and is a damn good game. However, the removal of the Akujiki soul-sucking does remove some sense of urgency that you can play as Hotsuma to really bring this back for a challenge. The level design really feels more longer and maybe less tight for some compared to the previous game. Some issues, like the lock-on confusing which enemy to snap to, still haven't been fixed. And the game, by and large, is pretty much damn similar to its predecessor except for the aforementioned differences. Still, I could recommend this game to anyone looking for a challenging action game and who enjoyed the first. But maybe if you haven't, play the original first. It might help you be prepared for this game. Though be ready to pay up. That's right, folks. Despite not being hidden gemmed by Metal Jesus Rocks, this game is starting to get up there in price. Japan copies top about $20, which is fine, but North American PS2 copies are getting into the $50 range, and PAL copies are going from anywhere $60 onward. I really wish Sega would re-release both in an HD collection, but, you know, still, even if you just emulate, just play it, period, because it's damn good. I give Nightshade a 4 out of 5. Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, click the big red button below to subscribe. Check out the other links in the description for more cool stuff, and check out the playlist on screen for more content. See you in the next video.